we're going to hand over to Lex, who is doing today's presentation, why you need to start giving a damn about accessibility. So, Lex Lofthouse, everyone.
Thank you.
Right, speak into that and into the laptop at the same time.
Okay. Right, I think I need to flick this one on for Teams. Okay, thank you everyone for coming. This is the earliest talk that I've ever given, so bear with. Yeah, my presentation today is why you should give a damn about accessibility, especially on the web. So I want to start this presentation by introducing Jeff. Jeff likes cycling, he likes making homebrew beer, he likes going to gigs, this is a down one, and he quite likes me. He's my partner, he's my boyfriend, my other half. And when we started going out, everyone always asked Jeff the same question: what happened to your arm? Now, Jeff has a permanently paralysed left arm, which was a result of a motorbike accident in his 20s. Well, that's the story that he tells people most of the time. Sometimes he likes to elaborate and say it was a shark attack or something. But for that reason, he wears it in a sling, which can be fair for people to ask him that question, because might be not a permanent thing, but no, he does have nerve damage. That means he has no real use of his left arm. He has a permanent disability, and you would think that the loss of use of one of your limbs would limit someone, but not Jeff. Not Jeff. He drives, he cycles, he cooks, he cleans, which is good. He does DIY, he mows the lawn. He can change a duvet cover, which I think is very impressive. But the list goes on. But what I think is very extraordinary about Jeff is that he's very good at gaming, despite having the use of just one arm. So when I first met Jeff, he had a Nintendo Switch, and he was playing Pokemon Let's Go Pikachu on it. This is a traditionally turn-based game, so you don't have to make kind of frantic quick decisions or insane kind of combinations on a controller. It's very much single inputs that aren't timed as well. So that's something that most people could do one-handed, but it was what Jeff was kind of limited to at that point. He had some success using like a traditional controller and using his mouth to control the joystick, but it wasn't particularly good for long periods of time. But everything changed when Jeff watched a YouTube video where he saw a guy with a bit of 3D printed magic. So if you haven't seen them before, I'm going to guess most people have. Nintendo Switches have a split controller, they're called Joy-Cons, and you hold one in each hand or either side of the console. But Jeff can't do that. He's only got the use of his right hand. So with the help of a friend who had a 3D printer and that YouTube video, he got his hand on one of these. So this is a tiny little dock, I guess, little holder that you can slot the Joy-Cons in back to back. And he was then able to use one hand. This is me using it with one hand. I can't do it like he can, but essentially you can access all of the buttons on both Joy-Cons with this little 3D printed holder. And it's a really effective way to make gaming accessible for him on the Nintendo Switch. So you can kick my ass at pretty much any game on the Switch now. There isn't a game he can't successfully play now with the help of this. They also come actually in so he has the use of his right hand. There is a configuration for lefties as well, which is cool. I'm left-handed, so I appreciate that. But we also play Overwatch on the PC, which is traditionally mouse and keyboard setup, but he can't use both of those at the same time. So this is a mouse that he has. I think it's a Razer Naga. Or something like that. But essentially it has a load of keys on the side of it that you can see there, that you can map to various keyboard inputs. There's quite a lot of them on this one. I've got a mouse that has like 2 mappable keys. This one has, I don't know, I want to say 12. So you can put WASD, E, Q, R, the other ones that you might need on there as well. But Overwatch is a really frantic game. It's team-based, you need quick reactions, and you have to consider a lot of stuff at the same sort of time. So it's really great to see how accessible some of the hardware for gaming is for someone like Jeff. Obviously, the Nintendo thing, he had to create his own one, but PC gaming has this, and Xbox and PlayStation, for example, have more adaptive controllers that are designed for those who might need a more accessible option. And it doesn't stop there when it comes to how accessible the gaming sphere is. Outside of hardware, games are increasingly becoming a really good standard for accessibility options. This graph just details some assistive or adaptive technologies that gamers with conditions or impairments utilize. So that goes from kind of sound, subtitles, sensitivity, font sizes, etc. Some examples of that, this is Fallout New Vegas. So in this instance, you can adjust the heads-up display to suit different color contrasts. So if you don't see certain colors particularly well, if you don't interpret contrast very well, you can adjust that to a color that suits your needs so you can see it against the background of the game. This is Like a Dragon Gaiden. So this is just showing their subtitle options here. So it's not just the size of the subtitles, it's the color. You can have speaker names in the subtitles. I think you can put backgrounds on the subtitles as well. There's quite a lot of options there for those who may need it. And then this is Minecraft. Minecraft has some really cool accessibility settings. One in particular that I like is the line spacing one. That is an interesting one that you don't see quite so often, but it also has more options for the text and subtitles. It also has some options for the kind of sneak and sprint. So essentially this is something that you would need to hold down traditionally, but you can set these on so that you don't have to hold it, which is great if someone has some trouble holding down keys for a long period of time. So the game industry has really kind of adopted quite an inclusive approach across the board. And while Jeff and myself both love gaming, we do access it in quite different ways. But my job is not in gaming. My job is on the web. My name is Lex. I am a web designer. I create kind of enjoyable experiences for the web through UX and UI design. I don't code. I do a little bit. I know enough about HTML and CSS to assist me in my job, but I never ever want to touch JavaScript again in my life. Whew. I am notorious in some circles for loving Comic Sans, despite being a designer. It's just misunderstood. Just misunderstood. If anyone wants to talk to me about Comic Sans later, hit me up. But I work for an agency in Nottingham called Enzyme, predominantly a web agency, and we're a really great bunch doing some good work for the web. So yes, this is me, a creator of the web. And as someone who works on the web, watching Jeff adapt and find something that worked for his abilities so that we could both play games together made me view what I do on the web in a different light as well. What were people with other abilities doing in order to adapt and access the web the same way that I was? And more importantly, what could I do to help? How could I make the web a better place for everyone? So that isn't to say that I didn't know anything about accessibility before I met Jeff. I was somewhat aware of that. I heard a Nottingham local called Helen Joy speak about accessibility and digital inclusion I want to say back in 2017 at Tech Nottingham event. And that's where I sort of began to start thinking about my own kind of bias, my own capabilities. I started to think about those kind of hurdles that people would have to overcome in order to use the web. This is a graphic that really stuck with me from her talk. This is from Microsoft's Inclusive Design Guidelines. And this is really helpful to understand that when we think in terms of accessibility and inclusion, we shouldn't just think of people who have permanent disabilities, like Jeff, but also those who might have temporary impairments or situational ones as well. And that's what this graphic here is designed to convey. So if we're talking about touch at the top, someone with a permanent disability might look like Jeff, having the use of one arm permanently, but it might also look like those who have a temporary injury, such as a broken arm, or someone who's in a situation such as a new parent holding a baby. So this way of thinking really kind of created this change in my mindset and encouraged me to read a bit deeper into accessibility and inclusion on the web. Up until that point, I'd kind of seen accessibility treated as a bit of an afterthought or not at all considered. It was a bit of a checkboxing exercise in some of the work that I'd done for the web. And I knew that that wasn't the right approach. I realized that accessibility should be a priority because it benefits everybody really, not just the people we might think of in the first kind of column here. Going back to games, wow, this is a really low-res video, I'm sorry. But an example of where I kind of felt that in action is playing Fortnite. So they have a tool in Fortnite, an accessibility tool, that helps you see where the sound is coming from if you can't hear or you don't see the sound. Sound is a major part of the game. It helps you hear when there's footsteps nearby from enemies. It helps you see where there's gunshots, and it helps you locate chests. So if you're hard of hearing, then you need another way to visualize this. So this ring that's kind of around the player here shows like footsteps, shows gunshots there. So it's something that you can turn on in the accessibility settings of this game. Now, I'm not hard of hearing, but I was for a time. I quite recently had an ear infection and I suffered some temporary hearing loss. And I benefited from this tool in the short term. But I've kept it on because it benefits everyone. It is truly a piece of kind of accessibility functionality that benefits everyone playing the game. So that prompted me, like I said, this prompted me to kind of dig a bit deeper and learn a bit more about accessibility. So you might have heard of these before. This is the POUR principles. These are a set of core kind of fundamentals for digital accessibility, and each principle covers a different aspect of accessibility. So the first is perceivable. I'm going to read these verbatim from some guidelines, so they might sound very direct. For perceivable, this means that information and interface elements have to be presentable to users in ways that they can perceive. It can't be invisible to all of their senses. So as an example of that, ensuring that a text-based alternative to images is available, for example. The second is operable. So user interface components and navigation must be operable so that users can be able to operate the interface. The interface cannot require interaction that a user cannot perform. So as an example of that, making sure that your website is easy to navigate with just a keyboard would cover that. Third is understandable. Information and the operation of user interface must be understandable. The content or operation cannot be beyond their understanding. And as another example of how you could look at this, maybe there's an icon on your site that's not immediately obvious, making sure that it's labeled in some way so that that's clear. And the last is robust. So content must be robust enough that it can be interpreted reliably by a wide variety of user agents, including assistive technologies. This means that users must be able to access the content as technologies advance. So again, as a final kind of example here, ensuring that your code has clean kind of start and end tags, that assistive technologies, such as screen readers, can navigate, would be an example of that. So that's just an overview of the core principles. But if any of these aren't considered, then users may struggle to use your website. And these principles form part of the foundation of the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines, which I'm sure many of you have seen, or WCAG, as some people call them. I don't know the best way to pronounce it. I like WCAG. But these guidelines have been created to ensure that the web is an accessible environment for everyone, but particularly those with disabilities. Under each principle, there is a range of recommendations for content and interactions, such as text, imagery, audio, language. The list kind of goes on. But each of these areas within the guidelines also comes with a level of conformance as well. And those levels range from A to AAA. So A is must have, kind of the most basic level. AA is should have, which is a good step up from there. And then AAA is the highest kind of standard there, which is recommended but not always required. And while the accessibility guidelines are not strictly part of UK law, the Equality Act is, and that makes it illegal to discriminate against various groups, including people living with disabilities. And while there have been no major kind of UK website with a lawsuit around accessibility standards not being met, there has been a few in the US. They have slightly different standards, but the point stands nonetheless. This was from 2018. There was a class action lawsuit that claimed that Beyonce's website violated their accessibility standards by denying visually impaired users equal access to the website. There's no alt text at all, which meant that they could not access the website. So the standards are really, really important, and the best place for us in the UK to try and meet them is to use the WCAG standards as a bit of a rule book. It still feels to me, though, that those standards can easily slip, and they're very important to kind of uphold and keep discussing. This was last week. This is a product launch from Figma. If you don't know what Figma is, it's design software predominantly towards web design, but they launched a new product under their brand called Figma Sites. So traditionally with Figma, you design a website and hand off to a developer. The idea is that you can create a web design and essentially publish it straight to the web through this tool without the need for code, which sounds lovely to me. But unfortunately, all it spits out is what someone described to me as div soup. I don't know if you can see some of the code here. So this is an example of their one of their websites. But essentially, this means that the website itself is just very inaccessible. Adrian Rosselli did a great write-up on this, which is where this image is from, and he said, "Do not publish your designs on the web with Figma sites." I'm going to read this verbatim. "Unless you want to fail all the WCAGs, create litigation risk, close off opportunities in Europe, engage in reputational harm, and oh yeah, throw up barriers to your customers and users." So it's really disappointing to see this from such a kind of big player in the industry as well. They've kind of disregarded a lot of users. And they're saying it's in beta and it's an MVP, but to me, the V in MVP means viable. And I don't think that this is viable at all, especially that they're letting users publish straight to the web with this tool now. So it's kind of like going back to this in my eyes. Yeah, Dreamweaver in the late 90s, bit of a throwback. So yeah, it's very, very important to me to champion the idea of making accessibility a really foundational part of your work. It's not just something that you add on as a feature. You make it a core component of the design and build from the start. As a designer, I influence a lot of how the website will look and function at the start of a project. I hand off to a developer. So if I'm not following the guidelines and putting accessibility first, then we've fallen down at that first kind of hurdle. I work at a design agency, so I work with a lot of external clients creating their websites. And accessibility used to be something I had to really, really champion and fight for with those clients. Nowadays, I'm starting to see businesses come to us and ask for it as, how do we tackle it, which is really nice to see. But it's not always that way. There are some clients that you still really have to help understand the value of accessibility. One tip from me, if they're not going to respond well to, it makes the web better for everyone. If they don't give a damn about that, then one really good tip to try and sway them into why accessibility is important is telling them that Google will penalize their website if they don't meet accessibility standards. So this is just a screenshot from Google Lighthouse. There is an accessibility score on there that will show you all the ways that you are not meeting standards. And if you can evidence that, put that in front of people and show them how that will influence their SEO and ultimately their bottom line, then they start caring about it. And digital inclusion sometimes goes further than what we can create and build on the web. There are other factors that come into play when we consider this. I recently heard my friend Sarah Haldari speak at a conference in Leeds just a couple of weeks ago about some factors that we might not always take into consideration, such as internet access is not the same for everyone. In rural areas, it can be very poor. I know this somewhat well. I used to live in rural Scotland, and my parents still do. They still live in the same house. In 2005, I think I managed to convince my dad to get broadband at the time because I told him about the wonders of eBay. So he was convinced at that point. They only upgraded that broadband last year. There's no fiber internet where they are. I don't know if there ever will be, but they also love iPlayer. And if you were watching iPlayer, they do have smart TV, but if someone else was on the internet and trying to do anything, then it would just spin and spin and spin. The phone signal there has taken a while to catch up as well. That's the only reason they've been able to upgrade, actually. I think it runs off of 4G, the internet they're using now. But it used to be really, really patchy. So they're only just catching up now. So it's not always easy to rely on digital services when you don't have good internet access in the first place. Second is up-to-date devices. Again, using my parents as an example twice now. They're actually quite technically good though. My mum started playing Wordle, so that's how I got her to use the phone. But this is the phone that my dad uses. It still has a button, so you can tell it's really old. I think it's an iPhone SE, if I'm right in that saying that, an old one. And it works okay. It works okay, but it's starting to come to sort of end of life. It's stopped getting updates. and his favorite app, eBay, obviously, has stopped working on his phone. So he's pretty devastated about that. Security updates will stop happening because they become too old. And it's a shame because the phone works fine in all other kind of aspects. And it just means that it's going to become e-waste as well. So yeah, some people have poor internet access. Some people don't have the means to have the right sort of devices that we need to update all the time. And lastly, just generally, more than 1 in 5 people in the UK live in poverty. So even if internet access is great and devices are readily available, some may just be too poor to access them, which in this day and age is quite debilitating for a lot of people as more and more services become digital. Libraries were once a great place to get onto the internet if you didn't have access, but the UK is losing them at a rate of about 40 a year. And banks, as another example, are choosing to leave the high street as digital services are prioritised more. So digital inclusion goes further than what we can just kind of see online. But that means that we also need to consider these kind of aspects as well, even when we work on the web. So making sure that we offer options that aren't just digital, where we are using the web, making sure that that's really fast, and using less data for people as well. So optimizing images, reducing the use of JavaScript as some examples. And then also looking at conforming to older operating systems, not operating systems. That's the word I'm looking for. Browsers. That's what I'm looking for. I know everyone stopped doing stuff for Internet Explorer. Yay. But some people still use it. So trying to be more compatible with older browser systems can be helpful. So yeah, that was kind of some of my journey into learning a bit about accessibility. And we all have to start somewhere. In this room is a cool start. I've learned a lot and continue to from people who do talks about accessibility. These are, and I'll share my slides after this, I've referenced 2 of these talks already today, but there's a couple of other great ones, one from Iri and one from Errol. Here, these are just some of the talks I've seen where I've learned a lot about accessibility. I'll share these at some point. So yeah, my tip is just to keep researching, dig deeper. This is just a start. That's big lit. The WCAG standards are, if you haven't had a good read through of them, that's another great place to start. But I want to leave with just some really bite-sized kind of actionable stuff from that you can take away today if you're working on a project right now, some things to think about. The first one is if you're making choices about fonts, ensure that you're choosing nice, kind of clear, easy to read ones, especially when it comes to large paragraphs of text. So top one's good, second one's good. Did you know that Comic Sans is actually a very dyslexia-friendly font? So I wouldn't actually suggest using it for your project, but if the need was there, it's very good. But things like the third one, which is more like a decorative font, or the one at the bottom, which is a bit more fluid, kind of handwritten, aren't particularly great for larger areas of text that go beyond one line or are small. Which leads me on to the next, which is font sizing. So when it comes to choosing size for type, there isn't like a super hard and fast rule in the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines, but it's generally kind of agreed upon that like 16 pixels should be the lowest you should go. It becomes slightly more complex with like relative font sizing, but as a general kind of rule of thumb, try and keep that sizing nowhere below that. And this just means that users are generally going to have a better experience reading your content. I was about to say I wear glasses. I'm not wearing them right now, and I should be. But glasses themselves are an assistive technology. and just making sure that you've got like a minimum kind of font size is really helpful for that. Next is checking color contrast, especially when it comes to text. So Web AIM has a contrast checker, and essentially what you do is put in a background color and a foreground color, and it will show you some examples at the bottom there of whether the color contrast is good enough to pass the WCAG standards at AA, AAA for normal text and large text. There is another tool I use, which is URL now, but this one's pretty standard across the board. I was bashing on Figma earlier. This is done in Figma slides, so I can't bash it too hard. But they have added a contrast checker directly into their design tool, which totally contradicts what they're doing with sites, but nonetheless, they're trying, I guess. Targets need to be big enough to hit, so links, buttons, any kind of object where the user needs to interact, especially for smaller screens, like mobile or tablet. It's important that that the links are large enough. Desktop has the luxury of a cursor. Using a phone, got the luxury of my big fingers. But also the distance between links as well should be good enough so that the user isn't kind of accidentally hitting another. It's just like I'm trying to convey how I could say that motion on websites is something that you really need to consider whether it's worth implementing. Lots of people have kind of sensory or photosensitivity issues. So if animation isn't particularly necessary, consider whether you should use it at all. Alternatively, ensure that it can be turned off in some way. So like a reduced motion setting, I think is becoming a bit more standard these days on certain devices as well, and on the web. And then lastly, a great deal of web content can be made accessible just by making sure that the HTML that's used is using the correct tags. I think they call it semantic HTML. Not code. But for example, you could use a div to create a button, or alternatively, you could use the button tag instead. The button tag applies some default styling from the get-go, but more importantly, it means that users can navigate just using their keyboard and they can navigate properly. It may look the same, but it doesn't function the same for everyone. You might not be creating the web itself. You might be creating content on the web that doesn't exempt you from making things accessible. So whether you're blogging, creating videos, or posting on social media, there are still some things that you can do. If you're posting images on the internet, you can make sure that they have alt text. So for those who don't know what alt text is, it's a descriptive text that conveys the meaning and context of a visual item, such as an image in a digital setting. And it ensures that people who can't see images are offered an alternative way of understanding that content. So good alt text should describe what's in the image, any meaning that is to be conveyed from the image, and if there's text in the image, it should say that as well. It should not be overly detailed, lengthy, or an excuse to keyword stuff. That is not what alt text is for. And certain social media platforms have allows users to add alt text. I think Twitter had it for a while, but I'm not on there anymore. Blue Sky, I'm on there, and they have a really good setting that you can turn on, which means that if you add an image to a post and you're ready to post it, if you haven't got alt text, it won't let you post it. You have to add alt text to the image. So that's a really nice way of making sure that you're consistently doing that. If you're creating videos, subtitling or closed captioning is a great way to make your video content more accessible, not only to those who have hearing impairments, but also in that kind of situational type of thing that we saw before. So if you're on a busy train and you've forgotten your headphones, for example, you can still watch videos if they have subtitles. I did that the other day. And it is becoming such a common practice that some platforms will offer automatic captioning, like YouTube. TikTok does it. I think LinkedIn does it as well. They've all got this kind of built-in automatic captioning. Word of warning though, do check it for accuracy because sometimes it's a bit dodgy. Lastly, on the content creation is don't go overboard when it comes to using emojis. I don't know if this will play, but have you ever experienced what this would sound like with a screen reader? Let's see if it plays. It basically says, don't clapping hands, overdo clapping hands, it clapping hands with clapping hands emojis. I love the language of emojis. I've written about it before. I think it's a really great communication tool, especially online, because it helps convey tone, but there are some do's and don'ts, and this is a big don't, really. Try and use them at the end of sentences. And then lastly, my big thing is kind of making sure that it's not just you who knows this knowledge. If you're working with other people, try and pass that information on. At Enzyme, where I work, we created a kind of like what the WCAG, but slightly shorter, and it's our accessibility guidelines internally. The design and development team put these together, as well as using it themselves. It's also great for our client services team to help educate clients, and it covers some kind of rules that we follow across the board, areas to consider, checklist of things, and some do's and don'ts as well. We didn't just limit it to a document as well. It was delivered to the entire business in a bit of a kind of stand-up presentation. And that was an accessibility consideration as well. Some people in the business engage with information a bit better when it's spoken rather than when it's written. So I think it's really important to keep talking about accessibility, make it a conversation, get others interested, get them to understand why it's important. Why is it important? Why do I still preach about this in 2025? Nothing I've kind of said today is really groundbreaking or cutting edge. Accessibility has been a growing topic in our industry, talks, blog posts, general discourse in our industry for at least the past decade or two. But I want to talk about it right now because it feels really important to advocate for. The other day I was watching a really informative TikTok video from a woman who happens to use a wheelchair. She was talking about her lived experience day to day. And these were some of the comments that I saw under that TikTok. I'll leave that there for a sec. So I'm pretty scared about the state of the world right now. I'm very scared about the recent resurgence in ableism and othering that feels like it's on the rise. I'm scared we're going to forget about those who need it most. I'm very scared that in some places, minority groups, people with access needs and disabilities and mental health issues are just going to disappear. And I know that sounds really hyperbolic, a lot for this early in the morning, but hear me out. It is a very important benefit to disabled people in the UK, and it is coming under threat. Many people rely on this payment because they can't work, they need specialist equipment, need to shell out for more expensive travel options. And some people use PIP for assistive technology, such as those required to help them access the web. But yeah, it is currently under fire in the UK at the moment. Companies in the US have been scrapping their diversity and inclusion programs under Trump's orders. Might we be following closely behind in the UK? Maybe. Diversity in the workplace is important. It keeps initiatives like accessibility and inclusion at the forefront through people's lived experiences at work. Minority groups are being thrust into obscurity, and in some cases, such as the UK's recent trans rights ruling, certain communities are having their human rights stripped away from them. It is like we're taking steps back in progress and steps forward into a scary future where influential figures are not only getting away with it, they aren't even silently dog whistling anymore. They're saying it with their whole chest. Elon Musk is a fascist and J.K. Rowling is a transphobe. Let me be very clear about that. They don't care about minority groups, and I believe that they're putting them in danger. This includes disabled people and those who rely on services that they need to be accessible. Which is exactly why it's important to advocate for an accessible web. It is a step towards a more inclusive future in general. I really love that the term accessibility is often shortened to A11, A11, why? However you want to say it, because it looks like the word ally. And that is something that we can all be. Advocacy and allyship are very important right now on the web and beyond. And that is exactly why I was thrilled to be part of the Nottingham Tech for Good Festival. Because an accessible web means a better web for everyone. And end on a higher note there. Lastly, before I wrap up, I want to mention that it is Global Accessibility Awareness Day tomorrow. So like I say, keep chatting about this to people, talk about it in your workplace, chat to your mates, bring it up at your next meetup, club, activity, whatever. There are also some other great events on around the city as part of Nottingham Tech for Good Festival. Shout out the lightning talks, which are Thursday, tomorrow evening here, I believe. It's here, right?
Yeah.
Excellent. Lightning talks are how I got into public speaking. It's a great platform to talk about anything that you're passionate about. And I've learned some great things at them as well, accessibility included in there too. Thank you very much, everyone, for your time and listening to me rant at the end. I really appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you, Lex. Has anyone got any questions for Lex? I'll check in the chat as well if I can. Figure out where that is.
Accessibility and blackout standards and PDFs. So if you're producing PDFs that are like text-based and forms to go into, how much consideration do you need to put blackout and accessibility, or is it all basically baked into it?
Yeah, the PDFs is like an sorry.
Lean into the laptop as well.
Hi. PDFs is a really interesting one because I don't know the correct answer for this, as in what is the gold standard for it, because PDFs aren't particularly an accessible thing. The way that they're output in a lot of cases is the text just isn't in the right order. I have recently read a blog from a guy called Haydon Pickering, and he talked about how if you can put the contents of that on a web page like a PDF, if that's possible, try and do that instead. I know that's not always possible, so I don't know the answer particularly to that one. PDFs are one of those that we need to do better on, really.
Cool. Thank you. Any other questions?
Basically, I've used the GoToCase style guidelines much, just because I've used about doing this since I've been breaking down a lot of the modern accessibility guidelines. They usually have quite a lot of just the discussion going on.
Yeah. I love the Gov UK web guidelines. They are probably one of the gold standards of accessibility. Again, I've seen some people speak that work there. I don't particularly use them because I don't work in that sphere. But if I did, I would absolutely. I have learned some things from those guidelines, especially the like the font size thing has been brought up quite a lot in those guidelines. So yeah, check them out if you, if you haven't. Yeah, they're great. Yeah, 100%, 100%. And again, a really accessible source as well. The way that they write, it uses really plain language and it's very easy to understand as well. So yeah.
Do you find, because you work with a lot of people, making accessible sites that you attract new customers coming to their priorities, accessible websites?
That's an interesting one. Yes, I think recently I've worked on a site where there was a lot of user research, and out of that came it's for a student accommodation website. And we implemented a lot of ideas that had come from kind of user research. So we've got a lot of case studies for that for that's on our website. So yes, we do find nowadays that people are generally actively looking for that as well, which is really nice to hear. But yeah, definitely, I think as you do more, it just attracts more kind of the right kind of client.
From a screen reader perspective, and sort of when you're designing it, how much thought into how to work with the screen reader versus, I guess, designing how much you work after you've done the UI. So, for example, you've got image and text underneath. You define like the design stage, it's all one element, or would you kind of cover up the idea?
I mostly leave that down to our devs if it's something that's maybe a bit more clear there, because they're very well versed in accessibility as well. But there are some elements, for example, if there's like a bit of decorative imagery in the design, this might not answer your question, but yeah, if there's a bit of like decorative imagery in the design that will offer really nothing to a screen reader, I wouldn't describe that in alt text, for example. I wouldn't say, let's, say, oh, here's a big flower coming out of the side of the screen, because it just doesn't really offer anything, and essentially just makes that journey harder. So yeah, most kind of layout elements I'll leave to the developers to kind of decide, but where I can offer some input, like that as just an example off the top of my head, I will do. Yeah. But the team's pretty good. Like I say, we've tried to educate everyone, and they're big advocates for it as well, which is great. Thank you.
So, what's the difference in AAA and AA?
Oh, there's
There's a lot of schools.
There's-
AAA.
there's a lot of different things, and each kind of element will have its own standards. So again, for as an example, like the color contrast accessibility has like its own thing to conform to the standards. So I think it's very much on a kind of element by element sort of basis, and there's a lot that factors into it generally. I can't give you a short succinct answer to it, but there's a lot to kind of cover. But the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines does generally outline kind of where that standard is, where it steps up to the next one for each kind of element that you're working on. Yeah.
I think like screen readers like specifically, but do they all like work in a standard way, or do you have to like test different like versions of screen readers and stuff? Or
They are different. There's not a kind of one standard one. We have a testing kind of one where I work, and now I can't remember the name of it off the top of my head. The one that I used in that example was the one that's built into Apple products, because they have like their own, it's got its own name as well, which is gone from my head. But you can essentially turn it on if you have like a MacBook. It's built into it, so you can try that one as like a really easy one to try out. But there are other services where you can set up a screen reader on your computer. But again, there are quite a lot of different ones out there, so we tend to try and test at least one of them out. So
Cool.
I'll hand back over to you.
So we've got no questions online. So yeah, thank you again, Lex. We'll end it there.
Thank you.